Where peace and democracy meet is the perfect focus of PDC's efforts. I think, again, it's a multiple faceted success. When I talk about partners, I often think back to a principle stated by the intellectual father of the modern European movement, Jean Monnet. Monnet once said, when you're faced with great challenges, you must first get the problem on one side of the table and the people on the other. It's a very important insight, and what I think Ray Schoenholtz, the founder of Partners, came to without particularly knowing that Monnet formulation was a very similar insight. When societies emerged from authoritarian or underdeveloped circumstances, there had to be a learning process in which the techniques of solving problems together, of putting problems on the other side and the people on one side facing those challenges as a common challenge. The problems that were faced invited some of the techniques of conflict resolution, of dispute settlement, most importantly, a general understanding that violence was not the way to build a successful community, that those who were part of a society, often a very pluralistic society, perhaps a bit like the United States is, they had to find ways to cope with their common problems through agreed common means. And that meant a communication and negotiating approach that did not choose sides irrevocably and oppose each other, but chose sides rather to oppose the problem. That's the kind of objective that Partners embodied when Ray Schoenholtz began to lead the effort, rather unusual, if not unique, among all of the nonprofit organizations, focusing on coaxing democracy onto a better path by using the methods of conflict resolution and dispute settlement. Partners began with a rather straightforward focus on the collapse of the Soviet bloc, the emergence of untested states in Eastern and Central Europe. And so the early efforts were very much pointed toward helping Poland, Hungary, then Czechoslovakia, later the Czech Republic and Slovakia, find paths toward the kind of peaceful harmony that permitted democracy to flourish. Over time, as those societies indeed mostly advanced on a democratic path, other states proved similarly situated with a need for some of these techniques and methods to be applied. And so over time, Partners with Ray again in the lead went into collaboration in Georgia, in a number of other states, not only in the old world, as we used to call it, but increasingly in parts of the Western Hemisphere, so that programs for Partners began in societies that already had some democratic history. And indeed, in the European cases, there had been democratic histories in many of the countries before the Soviet takeover after the Second World War. So what I would characterize as a continuing principle has only been successful because there has been agility in the Partners leadership to move into new countries, new societies, where the need was comparable, but in a very different set of circumstances. Often authoritarian regimes had held sway in some of these countries, or flawed democratic one-party regimes. And so there was an attempt to engage civic society in many of these countries to deal with their specific local problems in a way that invited these collaborative dispute settlement techniques. You have in particular to do something that goes back to the initial concept. Find the local talent, the indigenous human beings who can take the lead. And one of the great successes that Partners has had is finding extremely capable people in each of the countries where we have operated and enable them to take ownership of and leadership of the local efforts in that particular country's Partners affiliate. You cannot impose these kinds of techniques from above or from outside. There has to be a receptivity. Often that receptivity can be made more alive by demonstrating the way the techniques have worked in some other settings. I think as Americans particularly, we have to be quite careful about not appearing to impose our preferences. Rather, we have to be in the role of facilitating local decisions to solve their problems locally with local talent, assisted when possible by experienced, capable people from outside. But the insistence on indigenous capability and capacity building will have to be the rule if indeed we go into other countries. Right now, as I said, I think we have to be very preoccupied with ensuring the continued success of the many countries in which we're already engaged.